There are moments in politics where a single sentence sounds bold, powerful, and full of confidence, until reality shows up and flips everything upside down. And one of those moments began with a microphone, a cheering crowd, and a claim that would quietly shake American grocery stores to their core. Because when Donald Trump said, "We don't need Canada's milk," it didn't just echo across political rallies. It echoed across refrigerated shelves, restaurant kitchens, distributor warehouses, and every business that depends on high-quality dairy. It was meant to sound like strength. Instead, it triggered the beginning of a crisis most Americans still don't realize they're walking straight into. A 2026 specialty dairy shortage that experts say will hit harder than people think. And here, on Northern Pulse, we're going to break down exactly how one sentence created a chain reaction that's now unfolding in grocery stores across the United States. What's missing? What's getting expensive? What's silently disappearing? And why this time, the truth isn't hiding in political promises. It's hiding in the cheese aisle. It sounded simple. It sounded tough. It sounded patriotic. Trump declared that the United States didn't need Canadian dairy, not their milk, not their cheese, not a single carton. To many people, it felt like a moment of American confidence, a declaration of independence from foreign products. But within hours of that statement, something happened behind closed doors. Importers started sending emails at midnight asking if contracts would still continue. Restaurant owners began calling their suppliers, asking whether shipments were safe, or if they should prepare for delays. Distributors began calculating new risk margins. Grocery chains wondered whether they needed backup plans. This wasn't because Canada stopped sending anything. This was because fear entered the market, and fear is the strongest trigger in the global supply chain. The U.S. dairy system runs on stability. Even a small disruption can shift prices. A political sentence can move markets faster than a hurricane. And, in that moment, the system wasn't responding to tariffs or policies, it was responding to uncertainty. And, in supply chains, uncertainty is the enemy of everything. But this wasn't even the real problem, because the weakness wasn't in milk at all. It was somewhere completely different and far more fragile. Here's the truth. America has plenty of cows. Cow milk isn't the issue. The United States produces more cow milk than almost any country on earth. But what America doesn't have enough of, and what it depends on Canada for, is specialty dairy. The high-value products, the artisan products, the premium cheeses that fill restaurant menus and upscale grocery shelves. And this is where Trump's sentence hit the hardest, because Quebec and Ontario don't just produce cheese, they produce world-class cheese. Goat cheese with specific textures American farms cannot duplicate easily. Soft, French-style cheeses that chefs depend on. Sheep milk cheese that requires a type of farming the U.S. doesn't specialize in. Canada exported nearly $500 million worth of dairy to the United States in 2023. That number may not sound huge on its own, but the impact is massive, because those products fill almost all the specialty dairy gaps in the American market. U.S. farms simply don't produce goat and sheep dairy at scale. It takes years to grow herds, years to train workers, years to reach production levels that meet restaurant demand. So when Trump said the U.S. didn't need Canadian dairy, it was like telling restaurants they didn't need flavor, grocery stores they didn't need variety, consumers they didn't need choice. The shelves tell a different story, and that story is only beginning. But the panic didn't stop in boardrooms. It spread faster and deeper into the entire food chain. Fear is invisible, but its effects are not. After Trump's statement, the reaction behind the scenes was immediate. Importers began scrambling. Distributors quietly raised prices. Supermarkets rushed to stock up on Canadian cheese before anything changed. Restaurants were perhaps the most anxious. One chef in Boston reportedly asked suppliers whether he should prepare to remove his signature goat cheese salad from the menu. A New York distributor warned restaurants that future shipments were not guaranteed. Nothing official had changed, but the fear was real. And when distributors expect shortages, they behave accordingly. They raise prices. They lower import volumes. They delay orders to avoid risk. They push costs onto restaurants. They treat rumors like warnings. And as the supply chain tightened, the small cracks started turning into visible holes. Cheeses disappeared from shelves in California, New York, and Florida. Prices quietly climbed in Texas, Nevada, and Illinois. People shopping for soft artisan cheeses found empty spaces instead. Goat cheese, normally easy to find, suddenly had a "sold out" tag. Restaurant owners quietly swapped ingredients without telling customers. These were early signs, warnings, of a much bigger problem. Because the supply chain wasn't just reacting to a sentence, it was reacting to the possibility that the United States might cut off access to something it simply cannot replace. And the truth is, you cannot replace a goat herd overnight. And you definitely cannot replace a national supply of specialty cheese by making speeches. But this was only the beginning of why the United States is heading toward trouble in 2026. Imagine you want to replace one ingredient in your kitchen, but the replacement requires 4 years of breeding, hundreds of acres of land, new equipment, specialized workers, and training an entire industry. That's what replacing Canadian specialty dairy looks like. Goats and sheep are not machines. They cannot be scaled instantly. Their milk production can't be accelerated by policy. American dairy farms are built around cow milk. The equipment, the expertise, the infrastructure, the processing facilities, everything. To switch to goat or sheep dairy would require billions in investment and years of development. Experts warn that even a small disruption in Canadian supply could take 5 to 8 years for the U.S. to adjust to. And that's only if the U.S. decides to invest immediately, which it hasn't. No presidential statement can change biology. No announcement can change how many goats exist on American soil. No tariff can force farms to produce something they're not equipped for. Canada already has the infrastructure. The U.S. doesn't. And when one country depends on another for a niche product, even a small crack becomes a crisis. That crack is widening, and anyone who pays attention to grocery stores can already see it happening. You can hide a political mistake with speeches. You cannot hide it from grocery shelves. Across the United States, something unusual began happening quietly. Soft cheese missing in multiple states, goat cheese out of stock for weeks, restaurants rewriting menus, grocery stores raising prices quietly, importers increasing margins to protect themselves. None of this was headline news, none of it made the front page, but it was happening, one fridge aisle at a time. Social media posts started showing empty shelves. People asked workers why their favorite cheese wasn't available. Restaurant customers complained that dishes tasted different. It wasn't a crisis yet, but it was a signal, a warning, a preview of what 2026 could look like if this path continues. Because once a supply chain destabilizes, correcting it is slow, expensive, and sometimes impossible. And meanwhile, Canadian producers aren't waiting around. They've already found new buyers. This is the part most Americans don't realize. Canada does not need the United States to survive in dairy. Europe buys Canadian cheese. Asia buys Canadian cheese. The Middle East buys Canadian cheese. Hotels, premium restaurants, and luxury stores across the world are eager for it. If the U.S. stops buying, or even slows down, Canada simply pivots to global markets where demand is exploding. And once those markets lock into long-term contracts, they don't break them easily. That means even if the U.S. wants the cheese back later, it might not be available. Canada's position is strong. The U.S. position is not. The dependency is one-sided, and markets punish one-sided dependencies brutally. And as Canada moves further into global export markets, the U.S. loses leverage. The only people who will feel the pain are American consumers. And that pain is coming faster than the government expected. Because the real shortage, the one experts quietly talk about, is set for 2026.
Experts say the United States is heading toward a specialty dairy shortage in 2026. And this crisis won't look like empty grocery stores everywhere. It will look like specific, painful gaps. Goat cheese disappearing for months. Soft cheeses doubling in price. Restaurants abandoning signature dishes. Premium grocery stores losing their most profitable items. Importers over-ordering, making shortages worse. Distributors canceling contracts to avoid financial loss. Canada redirecting exports permanently. This is not a prediction based on politics. It's based on supply chain mathematics. Because once fear enters a system, three things happen. Suppliers reduce risk. Importers increase margins. Consumers feel the cost. The worst part? Even if the U.S. tried to rebuild its specialty dairy industry today, it would take years to catch up. Farms don't grow overnight. Goat herds don't grow overnight. Global contracts don't break overnight. And so, the United States isn't facing a sudden emergency. It's facing a slow, grinding shortage that will peak in 2026, with regular families paying more for products that used to be affordable. Restaurants will quietly remove items. Shops will quietly raise prices. Consumers will quietly notice. And all of this traces back to a moment when political pride ignored agricultural reality. In the end, this entire story is not really about milk, cheese, or even trade. It's about the cost of ignoring reality. When political leaders speak with confidence, people often assume the system behind them is equally strong. But the dairy crisis unfolding in the United States proves something different, something uncomfortable, something most leaders avoid saying out loud. You cannot shout your way into self-sufficiency. You have to build it. And the truth is, America didn't. For years, the U.S. relied quietly on Canadian specialty dairy to fill the cracks that domestic farms simply couldn't cover. Goat cheese, soft artisan cheese, sheep milk products, all the items that make restaurant menus richer and grocery stores more diverse, came from a system built carefully in Quebec and Ontario, not in Wisconsin or California. When Trump declared America didn't need Canada's milk, it made headlines. But headlines don't produce cheese. The market does. And the market responded instantly. Prices crept up. Imports slowed. Shelves developed small, strange gaps that consumers noticed but couldn't explain. Restaurants rewrote menus. Importers changed contract terms. And beneath all that, a slow-burning shortage began taking shape. A shortage experts now warn will hit hardest in 2026. What makes this moment so important is that it exposes a bigger weakness: the gap between political performance and economic reality. Politicians can talk about independence, but supply chains operate on logic, biology, capacity, and time. Goats cannot be grown by executive order. Cheeses cannot be crafted by campaign slogans. And global buyers do not wait for countries that think they're irreplaceable. The shelves are already offering the verdict. The signs are already visible. And the warning is unmistakable. If the United States continues pretending it doesn't need Canada, 2026 will prove just how costly that illusion can become. On Northern Pulse, this story is far from over, and reality is just beginning to surface.